They called him a man of exquisite taste. A whisper of the old world in a city that had long forgotten manners. Every Sunday, he wore a charcoal suit pressed to perfection, fed pigeons from a silver tin, and tipped his hat to passing women with a gentle nod. His name was Harold Maynard. Retired diplomat. Widower. Devout chess player. And, as we'd later discover, a man who had blood on his hands. A lot of it. Belgravia, London. 1997. Harold Maynard lived on the corner of Eaton Place, in a modest yet elegant brownstone. His neighbors described him as the last gentleman of the old empire. He made tea precisely at 4 p.m. Attended mass without fail. Kept a stack of well-worn books on Cold War diplomacy beside his armchair. Nothing about him screamed violence. Nothing even whispered it. Until the night he was taken in, quietly, without fanfare, by two men in plain clothes. There must be some mistake, a neighbor told the press the next day. Mr. Maynard? He wouldn't even step on a snail. But what they didn't know was that Harold had spent 40 years walking among them with a secret stitched into his bones. Scotland Yard had received an anonymous letter 3 weeks prior. It contained no threats. No fingerprints. Just 7 names. Each one, a victim of an unsolved murder between 1952 and 1967. At the bottom, one line in precise calligraphy read, "Not all monsters hide in shadows. Some were cufflinks." The letter led to the reopening of cold case files long buried. One in particular stood out, the Butcher of Belgravia, a name given by the press in 1964 after the dismembered remains of a foreign dignitary were discovered in a London canal. A name long forgotten. Until now. Who was the butcher? The Butcher of Belgravia was a ghost. No patterns. No signature. The victims were all men, all foreigners. Some diplomats. Some suspected spies. Some seemingly random. The cause of death was always precise, one stab, clean through the heart. Dismemberment came after. Always post-mortem. Always surgical. There were no sexual elements. No trophies taken. No clear motive. Until the letter surfaced and it brought them to Harold Maynard. During interrogation, Harold was polite. Cooperative. Even humorous. A detective asked him, "Mr. Maynard, do you know why you're here?" Maynard replied, "Oh, I assume it's not for my scone recipe." But when presented with the list of victims, he didn't flinch. Instead, he looked at the names, nodded slightly, and said, "They were men who betrayed this country. Not by politics, but by choice. If I did, I simply did what your system refused to." The room fell silent. "Are you confessing?" asked the detective. "Oh, I'm just saying," Maynard replied. There was something chilling about the way he said it that'll make someone believe he was the killer. However, forensic techs found nothing in his home, no weapons, no trophies, no signs of madness. Nothing connecting him to the crimes except for the anonymous tip in the letter and suspicion hanging in the air. So they let him go but secretly kept surveillance on him. With further investigations, the authorities discovered that the victims were no saints. And they wondered if Harold Maynard was a monster hiding in plain sight, or a moral executioner that operated in a time when justice wore a blindfold. Would you call a man evil for killing evil men, if the law had failed to stop them? Tell us in the comments, is justice ever justified when it's served in secret? Before he was called a killer. Before the papers branded him butcher, and the justice system struggled to define him. Harold Maynard was a patriot. Or at least, he believed he was. Born in 1922, Harold Maynard grew up in Surrey under the shadow of 2 world wars. His father was a decorated World War I officer. His mother was a church organist who believed in silence over sympathy. He was the kind of child who never cried, never raised his voice. By the time he turned 18, he was speaking French, Russian, and German. At 22, he was recruited into the Foreign Office. But not for diplomacy. Not really. He was trained to observe, record, manipulate, and, if necessary, eliminate. Post-war Europe was a fractured mirror. Allies turned rivals. Secrets became currency. Harold operated in East Berlin in 1951, posing as an attaché, gathering intel. But his job quickly evolved. He wasn't just watching enemies anymore. Harold was watching the world, fluent in its languages, comfortable in its shadows. He was watching traitors. British agents selling secrets. Diplomats being blackmailed. Men with titles doing unspeakable things for money, power, or protection. The war never ended, he once said. It simply changed language. In 1953, Harold intercepted a communication that changed everything. A British official, someone he respected, had tipped off Soviet agents about the location of an MI6 safe house in Vienna. 3 of Harold's colleagues died. 1 was tortured. Another, a young recruit he mentored, was never found. And the traitor? He was never prosecuted. Never even suspended. He retired comfortably in Kent, gave lectures, and was buried with honors. If law protects the wolves, Harold would later say, what use is law to the sheep? And so came the birth of the ledger. Between 1954 and 1967, 7 men were found dead. All prominent. All shielded by bureaucracy, diplomacy, or silence. All Harold believed had betrayed their country in one way or another. He never used poison. Never hired others. His kills were personal, efficient, almost surgical. A clean stab. A dissection meant not for sadism, but symbolism. He documented each kill meticulously, not out of pride, but as evidence. The ledger wasn't a trophy. It was a dossier. A record of sins committed and sentences carried out. He referred to his targets not as men, but as endgame pieces. During the day, he charmed ambassadors. He hosted quiet dinner parties with Chopin playing in the background. He played chess at Hyde Park, always choosing white, always opening with e4. He married once, a linguist named Margaret. No children. No close friends. He loved her deeply, but saved her the troubling details of his secret life to protect her. She died of illness in 1978, never knowing the man she slept beside was also the man who silenced monsters. In 1967, his final victim was different. Younger. Arrogant. A rising star in the intelligence world, with a history of compromising operations for personal gain. But this one had powerful allies. Untouchable by courts. Celebrated in the press. Harold followed him for 6 months. Watched him charm the public while selling files to foreign agents. He laughed at consequence, Harold wrote. So I became consequence. That was his last kill. After that, the ledger went into hiding, and Harold vanished into civilian life. Can a man be both a murderer and a moralist? Do intentions excuse actions, especially when the system stays silent? Was Harold a relic of a harsher time, or a necessary shadow in a world built on secrets? In April 1997, Harold Maynard had suffered a mild stroke. During his hospital stay, a longtime housekeeper was instructed to keep things in order. The housekeeper found the ledger by accident. hidden behind volumes of Latin poetry, bound in cracked leather, lined with names, dates, methods, motives. It wasn't a diary. It was a confession, meticulously crafted over decades. But it wasn't written for absolution. It was written for judgment. She never intended to pry. But curiosity is a fragile door, and once opened, it consumes. She turned the ledger over to the police. At first, it seemed like fiction. A hoax. But when investigators followed the dates, the obituaries, the autopsies, the patterns, what they uncovered matched too well to dismiss. This time Harold Maynard was arrested with enough evidence. Within weeks, newspapers and tabloids crowned him the Butcher of Belgravia, the gentleman killer, the last executioner. Photos of his elegant flat, chest trophies, and neatly ironed suits went viral. He wasn't who people pictured when they thought serial killer. There were no basements, no chains, no mutilation. Just a ledger, and the unnerving sense that maybe he had a point. The trial began in September 1995. Prosecutors charged him with 7 counts of first-degree murder. The defense argued moral justification, that the victims were rogue agents and state-sanctioned traitors. The courtroom wasn't just a legal battleground. It became a philosophical crucible. What defines a killer? Who has the right to determine guilt when the system fails? Maynard, ever composed, testified once. "I did not kill innocents. I ended threats that your justice system turned a blind eye to. And for that, I expect no mercy." His voice was calm, measured, almost reverent. Public opinion fractured like glass. Some saw him as a vigilante with a conscience, the only man with enough resolve to do what others wouldn't. Others branded him a sociopath hiding behind nationalism. Letters poured in from veterans, former intelligence officers, and citizens who had lost loved ones to Cold War operations. Many expressed quiet admiration. One retired agent even wrote, "If Harold is guilty, so are half the men buried in Westminster." After 47 days of trial and deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. When asked if he had any final words before sentencing, Harold simply said, "History will decide if I was a monster or a mirror." He died 2 years later in prison. Peacefully. Alone. No known relatives attended the funeral. His ashes were scattered over the Thames as per his will, unmarked, unmourned, unafraid. In 2012, a classified MI6 memo was declassified, verifying that 5 of Harold's 7 victims had indeed been under investigation for espionage or treason at the time of their deaths. None had ever been charged. Suddenly, the conversation reignited. Was Harold Maynard a killer who got lucky with his targets? Or was he an unofficial instrument of justice, operating in a world where morality was inconvenient? One commentator wrote in The Guardian, "He did the wrong thing, but for the right reasons. And that may be the most dangerous kind of man." Was Harold Maynard truly guilty? Or was he the consequence of a broken system that refused to clean its own house? What would you do if justice turned its back on you, and you had the skills to deliver it yourself? Leave your thoughts in the comments. But choose your words carefully. History is always listening. Now if you think his death was the end of it all, think again. Because the real juice is yet to come. When Harold Maynard died, the world thought the story ended with him. A closed case. A dead man. A resolved mystery. But stories like this, they don't end. They ripple. And so came the mystery of the eighth name. 2 years after Harold's death, a journalist named Claudia Hearn received an anonymous tip, a microfilm reel hidden in a hollow chess piece, allegedly taken from Harold's personal effects. On the film was a page, same handwriting, same ink. But the ledger's list didn't end at 7. It ended at 8. The eighth name had been blacked out, violently, with thick slashes of ink. But next to it, a single line remained. He knows. He always knew. Theories exploded online. Forums lit up. Who was the eighth man? And why had Harold withheld his identity? An FOI request to MI6 revealed a missing internal document labeled, Maynard, Red Protocol, Potential Collusion. The document had been logged in 1979. It vanished from the archives in 1998, a year after Harold's arrest. Internal audits confirmed it wasn't misplaced. It had been removed, by someone with high-level clearance. Why? And who had the power to bury something like that, right as the media labeled Harold a lone wolf? Every good cover story, one former agent once said, needs a villain we can afford to sacrifice. Back in 1997, 3 weeks before Harold's trial, a man was seen visiting him at Belmarsh Prison. He was tall, in his mid-60s. No name was registered on the logbook. No official record of the meeting. But security footage later leaked showed the man carrying a briefcase and leaving without it. Harold's attorney claimed he was never told about this meeting. Prison staff were silenced under the Official Secrets Act. The footage was later erased from official records. Who was the visitor? A former ally? Handler? Or the elusive eighth name himself, tying up loose ends? In 2010, an old intelligence group photograph resurfaced, dated 1955, Berlin. Harold sat in the middle. Behind him on the edge was a man whose face had been deliberately scratched out. Same build. Same suit. Same briefcase as the mystery visitor. Photographic analysts confirmed the scratch wasn't natural wear. It was removed intentionally from every known copy of the image. Why? Erase the face. Save the myth, one intelligence historian speculated. In 1999, months before his death, Harold reportedly wrote one final letter addressed to the people of England. The letter never reached public hands. It was intercepted by the Ministry of Defense for national security reasons. But a prison chaplain claims Harold read him the opening lines before sealing it. I did not act alone. And if I am to die with truth inside me, then I have failed twice. Was his life a legacy or lie? Harold Maynard remains a paradox. A patriot who killed. A murderer who kept order. A ghost used by others, or a puppeteer who blurred justice with vengeance. Years later, a documentary film crew uncovered old reel-to-reel interviews from a retired MI6 officer. The audio was damaged. But one part was clear. We called him the gentleman because he always cleaned up after our sins. We just didn't expect him to write them down. So now, dear listener, we ask again. Was Harold Maynard a monster who wore the face of civility? Or was he the perfect scapegoat in a world that feeds off secrets and silences those who expose them? Because sometimes, the real butcher doesn't hold the knife. He signs the order. Who do you believe was the eighth name? Was Harold protecting someone, or threatening them? And most importantly, do you believe he was truly alone? Or was Harold Maynard just the beginning? Leave your theories below. We're watching. Maynard never asked for forgiveness. Never claimed to be right. He simply acted when no one else would. Not a hero. Not a villain. Just a man who knew what needed to be done. and did it in the dark. He was, many believed, the last executioner.